how hard can it be to build a Viking boat? Oh. Hey there, I'm Sabrina, and this is History Remade. In each episode, we deep dive on an iconic object in history and try to remake them using time-accurate techniques and whatever I could find at my local craft store. Today we're building a Viking longship to figure out how its unique design helped shape the Viking legacy. Let's do this. Alright, so before we build it, I think it's important to know a little bit about Norse culture and how it fundamentally shaped the now famous longship design. Because if there's one thing you should know, the Vikings loved boats. Now, this appreciation stems from necessity. Scandinavia, mainly Norway where Vikings originate, is difficult to traverse by land due to large mountains and steep valleys. However, their coastline is littered with narrow inlets of water called fjords that connect inland regions to the ocean and to each other. Thus, shipbuilding became a central focus for Norse economics, culture, and military. Originally carved out from a single log and powered exclusively through rowing, the familiar longship design you know today took centuries to develop. But the key developments that set them apart from their contemporaries are their distinctive design and thoughtful woodworking techniques. The longship shape is streamlined to allow for high-speed travel, and its keel sits close to the waterline. These combine to make the ship ideal for beaching and raiding both coastal and inland settlements on rivers like the Rhine or the Seine. While the inclusion of a sail gave the Vikings the power necessary to travel long distances, even reaching Newfoundland and other parts of North America 500 years before Christopher Columbus discovered the New World. And by cultivating trees and paying close attention to wood grain, Viking ships were robust in both frame and form. Now, it's important to note that Viking warfare wasn't focused on ship-to-ship action. Instead, it simply enabled Vikings to grab power through land raids across the continent and maintain that grasp through trade and allyship. Now, all of that combined to enable the Vikings to claim the power available after the fall of Rome in the Middle Ages. Well, the largest Viking longship was like 30 meters long, so I think that if I can build something bigger, I can achieve world domination.
No.
You don't think that the History Channel is pro-world domination? Okay, so we're gonna be building a generic Viking longship instead, and it's gonna be small, totally incapable of dominating a kiddie pool, let alone the planet. Anyway, let's do this. Take one. Just like with every build, we're going to focus on exploring time-accurate techniques over time-accurate materials. So we're going to use things that you can grab at your local hardware or craft or apparently grocery store. The process breaks down into 4 steps: laying the keel, filling out the hull, the rudder and sail, and finally, decoration. The keel extends across the bottom of the boat, and it's kind of like the spine. So it needed to be strong to accommodate Viking military tactics like beaching or traversing shallow waters, which might get the bottom of the boat bumping against land. To do this, Vikings would carve it from the heartwood of a large oak log. That's near the central point where the rings of a tree originate. It's actually the most durable part of a log. For me, I'm gonna be using a watermelon. Specifically the rind. I know it's not quite the oak heartwood you might expect, but it does capture this fundamental idea that permeates throughout Viking ship design. Make the most of what is naturally there. But first, I need to get the watermelon bit out of the watermelon. Just like how the Vikings did it. Shipbuilders would be really careful to respect the natural structure of the wood, or in our case, watermelon rind. This would achieve the best return. They'd carve out a beam with a T-shaped cross-section around the heartwood. So let's just start cutting. Do you think I'm respecting the wood, Melissa? Actually, we could just remove that now. So this bit right here is going to act as the spine of our ship. And now I'm going to carve out that T-shaped cross-section that they used. So this would be at the bottom, and then the wood attaches beneath, so it pins upward. Does that make sense? Nice, that's what I want to hear.
There we go.
There we go. So you see that little T-shape right there?
Yeah.
So this is the keel of the ship. Now the bow and the stern would be similarly carved using some naturally curved wood, like the base of a trunk where the tree meets the ground. I'm just gonna be using like the curvier sides of the watermelon. We keep going. We are making tiny boat. We use tiny knife. This will be boat. So here's the bow, here's the stern, or vice versa. I don't know, they look about the same. Anyway, you'll notice that there's a bit of a step here where there's like an extra amount of wood. Now this stepped interior accounts for the rest of the hull where those planks would need to connect and be nailed in. The bow, stern, and keel were connected with sturdy nails. I'm just gonna be using toothpicks. How many times do you think I'm gonna accidentally stab my hand this episode? That works surprisingly well. The redundancy required to achieve this though, because this looks a whole lot like this in hindsight. Anyway, now we are ready for step 2, filling out the hull. This is where the Vikings got a little bit spicy again by maximizing the natural strength of wood. They selected these straight-growing logs without knots, but instead of just sawing out boards, the Vikings would split the wood along its grain. This would make the most of those pre-existing bonds in the wood and create planks with this greater, more uniform strength. Now they did this through a process called radial cleaving, hammering wedges into the log until it's split in half, then quarters, then eighths, then sixteenths. Instead of wood, we are going to be using sugarcane. Here we go. We're gonna try and wedge this down the middle. Where's my hammer? Oh, right. Covered in watermelon juice. So here we go. We're just wedging down the middle. Oh my God! Maybe the Vikings were onto something. Hold on. All right. I feel incredibly powerful right now. Now we're just gonna do that a few more times. Okay, so now that we have our planks, we're now going to need to attach them to the keel. Starting from the keel, they would work their way up, nailing the new plank layer slightly over the old and water sealing the gap with caulking. But not the usual silicone stuff that you might see in your bathroom. No, Viking caulking was made out of animal hair dipped in something sticky, like pine resin or tar. In our case, we are going to be using hot glue, because hot glue solves all of our problems. I proceeded by gluing and hammering the best that I could, but it soon became clear that hot glue doesn't solve all of our problems. Maybe the Vikings are better craftsmen than me. We have hot glue, we have like a super glue, we had a white glue, we had a clear glue, we had a PVA glue. We used all of these glues, but foolishly forgot that anything with any moisture will just not glue very well. I think we need to pivot. So, I showed you what radial cleaving is, right? This is our planks of wood. They're wonderful, they're beautiful, they really illustrate the Vikings' technique in splitting wood in order to get planks. However, they are nearly impossible to put together with little toothpick nails. As you can see here, it's not going to look like a boat by the end of this. So if we use the watermelon rind, do you know what will happen? We're gonna end up just reassembling the watermelon. But I think it's what we need to do if we want to end up with anything that could look even vaguely seaworthy. Now let's reassemble a watermelon. I really thought this was gonna be a lot easier than the pyramid.
Here you go.
My girl's being held together by dreams or nightmares. I don't even know anymore. So, There's one thing that you should know about the inside about this boat. They use these boomerang-shaped ribs, which were attached perpendicular to the keel, just to strengthen the hull. Again, these ribs were carefully selected from trees that were already naturally the ideal shape. Are these the ideal shape? Is anything about this ideal? I don't know, but we're just gonna plop a few of these in here to hopefully keep this bad boy from falling apart. So there's a little bit more nuance to the inside of this hull than I can explain because of my nightmare build. However, we're gonna cut to past Sabrina to explain. There are a few finishing touches to the hull whose design depended on a bunch of different historic factors, like who was making it, how long they had, and whether the boat was made primarily for war or trade. But generally, they'd strengthen the boat with cross beams that connected to the side of the boat with a joint called a knee. Now, these beams could also double as a seat. I'm just going to use more sugarcane with uncooked macaroni. Now, to secure the mast, there would be a large block on top of the keel with a slot in it. Once the mast was set inside of the block, it was wedged upright. I'm just gonna toothpick in some air-dry clay to act as the keelson and stab in a straw. Engineering. This boat barely qualifies as a boat. However, the hull design that I kind of described to you might not see it here, was essential to the Vikings' success. Where other ships of the same period might focus on a more robust, heavy frame and leave the hull as a simple, waterproof skin prone to damage, Viking ships gave as much focus to the hull as the frame to create a more holistically strong design. Now, we can move on to step 3, the rudder and the sails. Now, the rudder, which is used to steer the boat, isn't actually that interesting. It's effectively just a large paddle or oar. The neat thing is that it isn't based at the stern. Instead, it's attached at the back on the right side of the ship, otherwise known as starboard nowadays. Now, the cool thing is that this term originates from the Norse word steerboard for the steering side of the ship. Port side also derives from this positioning, since ships would need to push into the port on the left side to avoid damaging the rudder on the right. The sail unlocked long-distance travel for the Vikings, but it wasn't easy to make. Now, I'm going to be using these convenient fabric strips, but the Vikings had 2 main options: flax and wool. Flax, otherwise known as linseed, could be processed and woven to form light and strong fabric, but it rotted really easily. Wool, on the other hand, was heavy and harder to water seal, but its elasticity could make the most of moderate winds and avoid rotting. Now, I'm actually using linen ribbon, but I've cut them into long strips similar to how the Vikings would have woven them. I've dyed it, treated it with glue instead of an animal fat mixture that they would have used, and stitched it together. It is time for step 4, decoration. Now, I just love that the Vikings made such a point to decorate their ships. It's not just cute conceptually, it's also incredibly fearsome. Old Norse literature would talk about these dragon ships, that is, these long ships with these carved dragon heads and tails that would be detached when nearing land to respect the land spirits. Besides dragons, there are also references to other figurehead designs like snakes and bulls. I could carve this beautiful dragon head. Trust me, I could totally do it. Just look at my craftsmanship. However, I'm gonna skip the middleman and just behead this bad boy. Now, I should note that these figureheads were usually reserved for the elite vessels, like for lords, noblemen, and kings. But even common ships had these beautiful, complex designs. They were etchings, all in the spirit of making it clear that this is a Viking ship and you should be scared. And also, it's just like, it's fun to personalize your things, you know? Can't blame them. That's for the History Channel to decide. Oh, I got it! It's so small compared to the rest of the boat. And there you have it. A Viking longship remade. Woo! Audience prompt? Yeah! Okay, the true build time for a Viking longship could take about 7 months and a lifetime of training. And that is probably pretty evident just looking at this. This took me 7 hours, and I couldn't even use the right techniques. I think the thing that really blows my mind about this is that I've always figured that Vikings were these merciless yet mindless warriors. And they were merciless for sure. They hurt people, they stole, they ruined lives. But that's kind of par for the course with militaries, isn't it? However, after working on this video, I know that they were far from mindless. I have this newfound nuance for Vikings, because at the core of their military force is this incredible resourcefulness, persistence, and ingenuity. But beyond the craftsmanship, the reasoning behind it is incredible. The Nords found themselves in an incredibly challenging homeland. But instead of accepting the isolation, instead of giving up and trying to find greener, less fjordy pastures, they persevered, and they turned those natural weaknesses into the basis of their strength, into shipbuilding. And rather than forcing nature to comply with their needs like other cultures might have, they cooperated with it. And sure, these ships were built for war, but they found a purpose beyond that, in trade and allyship. And these people, who could have so easily been left isolated in their mountains and valleys, found themselves reaching across continents, oceans, and time. Y'all want to see if this bad boy can float? I'll show you, but first you gotta comment down below with what iconic object you think we should build next. And while you're at it, why not like, share, and subscribe? You know the drill. All right, you ready? Are we all ready? Okay. Oh, I know the answer. I can see the holes. Okay, hope you commented. Oh, it immediately filled with water.
Well, doesn't the captain go down with his ship or whatever?